There's this character in the book who says people can be forgiven for believing the nursery tales they were taught in school. I think that gets at why history is so interesting. The respectable version of history is always collapsing under the weight of the more complex, disreputable version. The bright, shiny version of events almost always came to us through morally ugly circumstances, human circumstances. In this book, the respectable things are the arguments behind the Bill of Rights, the language of liberty, the aspirational ideas that shaped what America wanted to become. But those ideas are moving in a world of smuggling, opium, ambition, deception, and violence. I do think it's a patriotic novel, not a simple one. Real patriotism, to me, does not require pretending that the past was spotless. We can enjoy the nursery tale version when we're children, and we can fall asleep to the civics textbook version later on, but the human story behind all of that is what interests me. That is where my imagination starts working. I've spent enough years watching politics, news, and institutional storytelling to distrust the version that comes to us polished for public consumption. The version our leaders force feed us, or the version political parties insult us with, is usually the least interesting version. And it's often the least truthful. The timing of the rise of Jefferson matters very much to me. The Father's Day has this built-in sense of inheritance. What did we receive from our ancestors? What do we pass on to our descendants? What did previous generations preserve, and what did they fail to repair? With America turning 250 years old this year, those questions feel even more topical and sharper. So the rise of Jefferson goes back to a moment when the promise of 1776 was still fragile. The country had been founded by 1789 when this novel takes place, but it still had to be protected from becoming something else. And through the plot, you'll recognize that that something else is the country where most of the events are set in, which is France. The arguments for liberty are being moved through sea routes touched by vice, the opium routes. That does not cancel the virtue of the ideas they carry. It makes the journey they are making more troubling, and I think more human and more interesting and more dramatic. No, it takes a serious view of America. Cynicism says everything is corrupt, so nothing is worth defending. The Rise of Jefferson says just the opposite. It says that liberty is so valuable that we should stop treating it as a given, as automatic. The Rise of Jefferson is suspicious of power, yes, but is not bored with virtue. France is a warning to America and a mirror. America in 1789 is still trying to secure rights through words, through law, through restraint, while France is beginning to discover what happens when liberty becomes intoxicated with power. Jefferson, at this point, is in Paris watching one revolution harden into another. That gives the American debate he is trying to feed across the water greater urgency. It's a race against time. The question's not simply what rights should Americans have, it's whether a republic can bind power before public learns how to excuse itself. Jefferson, of course, he's central, but Gouverneur Morris, to me, is one of the more interesting discoveries for me. James Madison is there, George Washington, Alexander Hamilton makes an appearance. John Paul Jones is very key to the adventure. Catherine the Great has a very key role in the plot. And you'll find out early on, Jefferson's counterpoint in Paris is a young up-and-comer named Antoine Saint-Just. And all of these characters move through the world of the book in different ways. Some of them are predators, some are harder to classify. I also created some fictional characters, some composite characters, especially Lucian, who is the narrator, the clerk who doubles as a spy. And these characters let the reader move through the underworld beneath the official history. More was planned than readers might guess, but not everything. I had the historical frame, the American stakes, the pressure from the French Revolution, the events that are leading that to rise, the Bill of Rights timeline, and the idea that books are traveling through these morally compromised routes. These were all the fixed plot points. But characters always begin to push back as you're writing, and once the real-life historical figures came to life on the page, the plot became less mechanical and more human, and everything started to flow more. Jefferson, Morris, Madison, Hamilton, Washington, John Paul Jones, Catherine the Great, and Saint-Just, they can't just be moved around like pieces on a chessboard without consequence. At some point, they have to have human fears, vanities, loyalties, imperfections, and that's where the fiction becomes interesting. You build the room carefully. You know where the doors and the windows are. You know where the furniture is. You know what history says must happen, but then you have to let imperfect, unreliable people walk around inside it, make trouble, hide things, misunderstand one another, and surprise you as the author and the creator, and especially the reader. Yes, but that difficulty is the fun. Historical fiction gives you fixed points, as I mentioned. Certain people have to be in certain places, certain events are attached to certain dates. But between those fixed points, there's room for pressure, motive, fear, rumor, delay, secrets, and consequences. And I tried to respect the historical architecture while using fiction to move through the corridors that official history is a little bit, where it's a little foggier and more dimly lit. That process has been demanding, but also exhilarating. Self-publishing means you are not only the writer. You're also the publisher, the designer, the production manager, the proofing department, the marketing assistant, the warehouse. You make decisions about trim size, the covers, metadata, pricing, ISBNs, ordering proofs, making corrections, the timing of the launch, and whether the spine of the book should be a shade brighter. That can be exhausting without a lot of coffee, but it also gives an author enormous creative control. For this project, absolutely. A traditional publishing path can be wonderful for some books, but it also involves waiting, compromise, and a lot of people having opinions before readers ever see the work. With self-publishing, the burden is heavier, but the distance between imagination and the finished object is shorter. There's something powerful about taking a book from idea to manuscript to cover to printed volume by your own decisions. I wanted the hardcover to feel like an old antiquarian volume pulled from a shelf, something with weight and atmosphere. The design needed to suggest American and French colors without looking like a flag pasted on a thriller. The richer tricolor cover, the gilded spine, there's a leather texture, and even the antique treatment of the barcode all serve the same idea, that this is a modern novel dressed like something history tried to hide and was collecting dust somewhere to be discovered. I would tell them that this is the golden age of creative possibility, but not a golden age of shortcuts. The tools we have at our hands now are astonishing. Research tools, design tools, publishing platforms, formatting options, audio tools for audiobooks, print-on-demand services. They've opened doors that were locked to most people for generations. But tools do not replace judgment. They multiply the importance of judgment. A writer still has to choose to cut, revise, question, polish, and take responsibility for the finished work. Readers should not expect a lecture that's disguised as a novel. They should not expect the founders of our country to be treated like saints or cartoons. They should not expect every mystery inside the plot to be tied into a neat bow at the end. The book has answers, I hope, but it also respects shadows, the gray areas. History is not a courtroom transcript. It's a surviving record of people who often had reasons to hide what they were doing. This is a good time to read this book, as it was a great time for me to write this book, because it's America's 250th birthday. It's a story about books, about power, vice, virtue, and the dangerous work entailed of carrying it to its place in history.